All right, let the record show it is Wednesday, June the 10th, and this is the Community Redevelopment Agency workshop meeting. With that being said, we'll get started. Mr. Mann.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I don't believe, are we still, am I muted? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, oh, there he is. There's Jacob Schumer. The first item on our discussion tonight is an update of the progress on the downtown plan consolidation that we contracted with Shepherd Associates. And we have Jacob Schumer online and Cliff Shepherd in the background as his backup. And with that, I just asked him to give us a brief overview about where we were, number one. Number two, when we expect the final product, and just a general idea of what that final product would be. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jacob and Cliff.
Thank you, Bill. Let me just quickly jump in here and say, I'm going to leave this in Jake's capable hands, but I know a lot of attorneys give lip service to the proposition that they are overseeing the work, and I wanted you to literally see that I am overseeing the work.
Point taken, sir.
And so we're in good shape. I think he'll be able to take it from here and give you what you need. We want to make sure that we give you the product that you guys are looking for, and he's going to explain what we've come up with, and if it meets your expectations, then we know what we're doing, and if it doesn't, then you tweak it however you want to see it. Okay.
Awesome. That's what I view this as a pulse check as well. So thank you.
Super. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Bill. Members of the board, as Cliff just mentioned, we are deep into the analysis of the problem or of the plan. Here's where we are right now. We've completed the bulk of our analysis. And right now we're just translating all that analysis of all the different plan documents, which parts of the plan are still effective, which parts have been superseded, and trying to put that into the best way to explain the effective portions, what is currently effective and what is partially currently effective, and how that all works in a way that'll make sense if you're reading it as a member of the board. And so right now what we are producing is a written summary of what we think the plan is as of today. A simulated redevelopment plan, which will be mostly just language, the relevant language currently imported from all the different plan documents, along with some language kind of guiding you to a way where it will basically read as if it were a redevelopment plan. And then a guidance document, which will be a lot of raw analysis in a color-coded fashion, so that you can see our conclusions as to each different written portion of all the redevelopment plans, all the redevelopment plan documents. I expect that we should be able to complete it in 4 to 6 weeks. If you would like it sooner, we can probably have it done sooner. But right now we're just polishing it to the point where it'll be most effective at communicating what is actually in this plan. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Schumer, I heard you say plan like 6 times and analysis like 7 times. So what does all that mean?
So for example, we have the original plan. Here are our baseline conclusions. The original plan is mostly effective when it comes to the framework, the legal framework, that is the powers that it grants to the CRA. And many of the objectives are still effective. And then some of the later developments, for example, the 1987 vision plan, or not 1987, 2007 vision plan, is now the most recent fully formed plan document. And so all the objectives from the vision plan are now what should guide the CRA going forward. Whereas the 2015 action plan is the most recent list of all of the currently authorized projects. And so the analysis involved going back and looking through these roughly, I believe, 10 documents, or there are 13 total documents, 9 total plan documents that are relevant for the CRA. that have been amendments to the CRA. So analysis basically meant going through line by line and seeing, is this language still good? Has this been changed by any of these later documents? And sometimes the answer was, no, nothing's changed. This is still good. This is still good language. Sometimes it said, the answer was, yes, it's still good language, but because these later amendments say something that could be different, it won't always be effective. So for example, in the 2007 vision plan, the vision plan provides objectives for the CRA, and those might not always be in agreement with the ones from the original development plan, but sometimes they will be. And so when you're following the 2007 vision plan, you will also have to follow the original plan, except unless the two conflict. And if the two conflict, then the vision plan wins, the vision plan prevails, because that amendment was passed and said to supersede that original plan to the extent that they conflict. And that was Mr. Graham, correct, that asked that question?
Yes, it was.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. So now if there's a conflict, this is the way I envision it. You have the original plan, that's kind of our guideline, tells us where everything is, and it gave us the authority for the CRA. And then the next plan pretty much lays on top of that. And if there's a conflict between the original plan and the next plan, either the second plan fixed the conflict or we have to address the conflict moving forward. Is that correct?
Right. So if there's there's the original plan, and then we have an additional 8 amendments on top of it. Each amendment was passed saying that this plan prevails in the event of a conflict with everything below it. And so if there is a conflict, the most recent amendment will always win. So if there's a conflict between Amendment 2 and the original plan, Amendment 2 will win. If there's a conflict between Amendment 7 and Amendment 4, Amendment 7 will win.
Okay.
And so there is some intricacy there, because some of the later amendments, so the amendment authorizing the community policing initiative explicitly made itself part of the vision plan, but I'm not gonna complicate matters because that is still effective. That's all good. So it's not gonna make things more complicated than it has to be.
Okay, thank you. Francis.
You're muted, Francis.
I can't hear
Unmute
you.
yourself.
I'm sorry, Ms. Pawlowski.
You're still muted.
Francis,
I'm
you're
on
still
a cell
muted.
phone.
You're on. You're good.
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. I just had a couple questions. You said that the powers and what have you seem to not have any conflicts. And so do you find any amendments to the powers that the CRA has into implementing these things when you were going through everything?
No, I didn't see any differences in powers. There were some references to programs for funding that I don't think exist anymore. I tried to find them, and I don't think they exist. But it appears that the CRA was granted basically every power allowed under Chapter 163, and I don't think that's changed since then.
All right, and then without going into too much detail, would you be able to elaborate on what has to go? Are we able to make contracts and agreements and look for assistance to fulfill parts of the plan without having to counsel, as long as it fulfills those parameters inside the plan? Do we have to go to council?
Without going to council?
So are you saying the original plans under 163, we would have the ability to contract with people and fulfill certain parameters of the plan without going to city council? Is that correct? And that has not been changed?
Right. Anything that you were empowered to do under the original plan, you can still do to effectuate the action plan, basically.
And was there any amendments to change the amount, like the cap, like you can't do more than, if it's more than $25,000, or Is there any amendments to it that say that we have to go to city council with monetary amounts?
Not that I can recall that there were any amendments. I don't
Okay.
recall any amendments like that. All these, my conclusions are, the conclusions that I would give you right now are tentative, but I don't recall any amendments to any kind of like cap about how much the CRA can decide to spend at one point. All of that framework as to what kind of powers the CRA appears to have been in the 1987 plan, the original plan.
Okay,
Francis,
thank you.
I think Bill Mann's got to answer that question.
Well, or just some additional information to consider, and having Jacob online is a good point. At the end, last year, at the beginning of this year, when we approved the operating budget, we had a certain amount for professional services, and it was acknowledged at that time it would be for legal services. So our contract with Shepherd Associates did not have to go back for funding. But we also, as the agency, have to follow the same procurement procedures as the city does. And I'm going to provide y'all a copy with our procurement policies. So that dollar amount is really manifest in the city's procurement in the procurement plan. It'll be a little more evident once you see that plan. So it's not a pick and choose about what has to go to the city or not. It's very empirical, and it's just based on our purchasing procedures. So there's certain things we do in the original budget that we anticipate, like, for instance, like I said, the professional services. I think we put $30,000 in it this year. That's why we didn't have to go back to visit it from council, because council also approved that budget. Now, if it was something that we hadn't anticipated, and it may come up with our next, after we hear our next speaker, that will likely have to go to city council. If it wasn't within that $30,000 we already had anticipated for funding, and if it falls above that minimum threshold in our normal purchasing procedures. Does that make sense?
So you're saying,
Francis,
can you hear me? So you're saying that, are you saying that the council, their procurement process has a monetary cap on it as well?
Yes, ma'am. And I can't quote it off the top of my head because I'm not regularly involved with it, but there's a certain dollar amount at which you have to get competitive bids, and there's certain dollar amounts that you have to go out for city council for approval. And I'll get you those procedures. I'll have them for our next meeting. That's something I've been
I just don't know how city council will have to get city council to approve something they're already voting on. I'm just making sure that we're not being shackled, because I feel like we've been shackled for a long time, and part of doing this is to make sure that we get our processes right, and we're able to actually get some stuff moving. So that's why I'm asking the question.
Okay, I understand.
And that's the only reason I'm asking.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I
Yes,
just want to
ma'am.
make sure that if we go forward and we get this planning, that if there's things we don't have to go to council for, we just get it done. I didn't know if there's a monetary reason for it. And you're saying it's always in the budget, because in my opinion, anything in the TIF fund, as long as we have applied it to an action item and it doesn't exceed the amount we budgeted, then my understanding is that we would be able to act upon it. That's where I'm getting at.
Okay, no, I understand. That will become more apparent when we have this discussion, and part about when we talk about the activation of the Dix Heights plans, the various component plans, that'll be made clear. And it's not that we don't have to go to council, it's that we already went to council because it's already in the budget. But we really need to talk about that procurement. That's a little of an offshoot from this current conversation, but it's a good question. We'll address that.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Francis, you still have the floor. You good? Anybody else have a question?
Go ahead, Gary.
Gary?
I just wanted to make sure I understood exactly what the end product is that we're going to be receiving. Are we going to get a plan that helps us understand what work had been completed under all of the different approved master plans? And then will we have a list of items that are still outstanding and things that maybe we ought to consider once the review is complete?
Personally, I was not planning to provide any kind of historical showing of what projects had been completed, because that shouldn't, that could have an effect on your ability to spend money on historical projects, because some of these amendments have basically said, these are the projects going forward. Bill Mann might have a better position to know what projects in history have been completed. For example, it's clear that the projects from the 1987 plan are either were either abandoned or have been completed. My project was to create a plan that shows, or the current end product includes a simulated plan where basically it's going to the best it can, read as if it were a plan that you adopted today, that is pulled from all the language from all the other plan documents, but it won't list any kind of like historical project data, but it will include all the projects that you are authorized to spend money on going forward. So if that's what you were thinking of. If you would like sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Let me just use an example, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which plan it was in. I think it was the 2007 vision plan. There was a call for doing some residential development on the pier parking lot area. Is that something that's going to be identified as a going forward project that still needs to be completed?
I don't recall that specific project. So that is the kind of thing that I would mark and include in the final product, both whether or not it is still effective and whether or not it's considered to be superseded. But from my point of view, the plan doesn't tell you you have to do these things. It tells you what you're authorized to spend money on. So for example, the wastewater treatment plant amendment authorized you to spend money authorized you to spend TIF money on a wastewater treatment plant. If for some reason that plant didn't happen, that wouldn't necessarily come out of the plan, even though that project was canceled. I don't recall specifically the residential development, but that is the information that you're asking about, which is this project still pending, and whether or not the CRA is allowed to spend money on it, or whether or not it's something the CRA is an action item, that will be included. So all the projects that were included in the 2015 action plan are the projects that are left over from the vision plan, including any one referred to within the action plan. That was the 2015 action plan. So if the residential project was included in the 2015 action plan, then I would consider that to be still a valid project for the CRA.
Most of the work that was done or identified in the 2015 plans were really a lot of infrastructure projects. It didn't really address a lot of the other types of projects, building type projects that were identified in the 2007 vision plan. So I'm not sure. I thought we were going to be getting something that gave us a plan to move forward and how to start making some significant improvements in the downtown district, other than just infrastructure projects. I may be totally wet here.
No, I think you're right, and this might have been my fault for not clarifying. This was always part one of the project, which is telling you what you have right now, and then part two is communicating with you all and the staff about what you want to see going forward. And so this is part one, and it's frankly probably the most work intensive, just because we had to go through and go line by line and see what's still there. But the end product, that is after this phase is complete and you all have provided your feedback on what you want to see going forward in the redevelopment area in the downtown area, then that would be a new plan of sorts that you might want to. I'm sorry, I accidentally cut off my everything. So yeah, that's the next step. After I show you what you have, what you're authorized to do, if you would like to do more, then at that point we'll help you on that.
Okay.
Mr. Mann?
Yes, sir.
Bill?
Jacob, I'm sorry. Okay. Jacob, one thing I wanted to know was the original Wallace Robertson Todd plan, the 1987 plan, had a graphical layout of the entire, or at least the core area of the redevelopment district, and spoke to villages, levels of intensity.
Mhm.
The subsequent plans, the main graphic and a vision plan was, there was a general example. I don't know if you've seen it. In fact, if not, I need to get it to you, that showed conceptual ideas about where parking structures could be, not necessarily, as you pointed out early, where we had to put them, but where they could potentially be. But I would think that if there's not an overlap, but the opposite, if there's a gap between the original WRT plan, if you physically lay the vision plan on top of it, if there's portions of that WRT plan that are still seeing the light of day, in my mind, that would be identified as being able to carry forward, correct?
Yes, so like the land use plan in the original plan
Yes, sir.
is still mostly there. There's amendments, I believe it's amendments 1 and 3 made specific changes to the land use plan, part of the original plan. And so those have changed the map, but otherwise the map appears to be the same.
Okay.
Because there haven't been any changes to the map, and there haven't been any changes to, it appears there haven't been any changes to the size of the district.
No, sir.
And there haven't been any changes to the density or anything like that. So
The only thing I will say that has changed is the 35-foot height cap, because the,
Okay.
even the residential village is part of the original, and I don't want to bog down on the detail, but that original plan, it spoke to certain absorbable market, market capacity, but it also spoke to the ability to be able to put 5-story structures on the properties. So that underlying has changed. That's just something I wanted to point out and make sure that it was on your radar, but it is. So. Okay.
yeah, and there's also some portions of the code that are referenced by the original plan either were relocated or don't exist anymore.
Right.
So I would consider that to be superseded, even if there wasn't any plan document that said this doesn't apply.
Okay, great.
Any other questions of Mr. Schumer?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sam?
Yes, I was assuming that this document was pretty much a fluid document, whereby some of the things that were in there in 1987 until now are no longer relevant. And I'm wondering if the updated version will reflect that.
So the way that I'm currently preparing it, and again, we're happy to make changes because we're making this for you. There are definitely portions of the 1987 plan that don't make sense, even if they've never been superseded, they don't make sense to read anymore. So like statement about the market conditions as they were in 1987, the budget that the city provided for the CRA in 1987, those things aren't really relevant. And there are a lot of descriptions of projects that are that certainly aren't relevant. And so what we currently have is that that kind of language where there was never anything that superseded it, but it isn't really relevant to the CRA anymore. We're color coding that a specific color, and we're not including it in the kind of simulated plan document. If you had any other ideas of how you'd like that language to be provided, I'd be happy to do it.
Sam, you still have the floor? Sam, is that it? Any other questions of Mr. Schumer? Okay, seeing none. Jacob, thank you very much for your update. You're more than welcome to sit here. You're more than welcome to sit here and listen to the rest of our meeting.
I think I'll get home to my small child.
There you go. Thank you, Jacob.
Have a good night, y'all.
Okay, police update. Mr. Evans, if you would give us an update on what's happened in the last 2 weeks.
Well, last Thursday, about maybe 30 hours prior, we had noticed that there was going to be a protest demonstration down in the Latham Plaza area. So we spent half a day just trying to find out who the promoter was, who the organizer was. We were able to do some investigating, find that out. We contacted her. I actually talked with her, and we came up with a plan to try to see what her goal was, how many people she was expecting, and what the kind of what the agenda was. Unfortunately, she was probably a first-time organizer, and it was just like pulling teeth trying to get the information from her. And really, we trying to tell her we just need to make sure we're there so we can keep everything, make sure they're safe, make sure our residents and our business owners down there are safe as well. Make a long story short, it went off without a hitch. There was a lot of people down in the area. We had a collective group here at the beach, including that we pulled mutual aid with Neptune Beach and Atlantic Beach, along with our police department. We had minimal officers down there, but we had about 80 something suited up, ready just in case violence did break out. It's not necessarily on the organizer, but in case someone else came in and kind of hijacked their event. At that same night, Jacksonville was having something downtown, so they said basically, we'll come if we're needed, but you need to be self-sufficient. So we were. We've since just found out yesterday that she's bringing it to Jack's Beach again tomorrow. This time she wants to do a march. And I met with her yesterday, and we talked to her for a while. We went down there and we came up kind of with a plan. So she is going to start the rally or the demonstration in the Seawalk area. She's going to walk. They're going to walk north on First Street up to 3rd Avenue North. They're going to turn up to the Boardwalk, and then they're going to march all the way back down the Boardwalk to the Seawalk area, cross the Pavilion area, cross First Street up into Seawalk, Latham Plaza, to end in front of our City Hall. With that being said, I went out and spoke to the majority of the business owners in the CRA area today that are the shops and stuff where it's going to be affected, just to make them aware of it. Because we're estimating about 1,200 people last Thursday. And that was with even a shorter notice than this one. So we'll see how this goes. So we do have officers. We have basically our entire department on standby. We'll be prepared, and hopefully everything goes off peacefully, which we anticipate it will, but we just don't know. And it is 100% right down in the CRA area. So as far as with the main police activity, that's all we've been dealing with. We had some bad weather over the past, week to 10 days, and we're expecting bad weather up until I think Friday or Saturday. So, but we do, I don't know if this is going to be a weekly occurrence in our city. She wanted to do it Friday night. I talked to her, and just with the bars going back to a certain percentage open with our regular crowd, and then having a demonstration. Our goal is to have her in and out before dark, so we can contain it. Keep everyone safe.
Is this organizer a beach resident?
No, she's not. There's two girls. They're probably 20 to 21 years old. One lives in Atlantic Beach and the other lives in Ponte Vedra.
Okay. Is there any sort of permit or anything they have to pull for this, or it's just anybody can organize and walk down the street?
They can. They don't normally issue permits for protesters. I got with our counterpart in Jacksonville. They're pretty much doing the same thing. They're not requiring permits as well. Me and my chief, we did talk with Mr. Staphopoulos and our city attorney. And at this point, we're not requiring a permit either. However, I did speak to her yesterday, and she was wanting access to electricity and some other stuff. I told her absolutely not. We would be happy to do that if she pulled a permit. And we have to have an electrician out there. We're just not going to lock the ballards and unplug stuff in. I explained to her what the process was for the permit. So now she's just looking for a generator. Their megaphone ran out of power last Thursday. So I know at this point we're just trying to do our part to stay involved so that we can prepare as best we can for our residents and our business community down that area.
Well, I thought you guys did a fantastic job last time. I talked to the mayor afterwards, and it seemed like you had a handful of people, maybe 5 or 6, that were actually looking for trouble, and you guys did a good job of, when the event was over, to kind of walk them out into their car.
We did. Thank you for saying that. We actually did, and I'll be very honest. There was at one point myself and the chief and the other two commanders. We also had Atlantic and Neptune Beach chiefs here at our command post set up here at our department. When we got video and pictures of this certain group, there was probably about 5 or 6 of them. It had goggles, gas masks, looked like helmets. They had everything on their belts, and they kind of walked in. When we saw them walk in off of First Street and go into the crowd and then turn to go up to the pavilion area, we were all just, I never thought we'd see that in our city, but that's probably the closest that we've been to it in my 31 years here. I just, we were all just saying a prayer that the thing worked out. We put our officers on it. I did, and I will have some undercovers out there as well. So we were getting live feeds from them, so we could hear what they're actually saying and doing, and keeping a tab on the crowd to see what the mood was within the crowd. And other than that, we also had a couple of trucks come by, flying some flags, and the crowd started yelling and hollering, and the truck stopped. And of course, we're watching it all on our video system, which is amazing. We love that thing. And we did have the officers. We didn't have officers stop the truck and just talk to them, say, it's really what you want your outcome to be, because you're just causing hate and discontent and just provoking them. So they understood, and they left the area as well. So we're just hoping everyone cooperates like that tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good. Any questions about the protests or about anything that happened the last couple of weeks?
No.
Sam?
Yes, Mark, let me ask you, for when you have crowds like that, do you have any specific training to deal with crowd control, or are you pretty much left to your own devices with that? How does that work?
We actually, believe it or not, back when we had the Super Bowl, we actually formed a field force. We have a SWAT team, and we have a field force as well. Field force is strictly for crowd control. And we actually, over the past month during COVID, we've had a couple of field force training days. We do have a young department. We have a lot of young officers that may not have been experienced with gas and that type thing. So we had done training. We've actually completed, the entire department's completed a couple of training for that. And here in the next, we don't know what's happening with the RNC, but we sat down today with a game plan. We've got some more de-escalation training, some more crowd control training. We've got our chief has a pretty, he has a big outlook. He's given us a number to hit as far as for additional training days between now and August. So we're going to have more coming up, but we are trained in that. And we do have that.
Good job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Mann?
Mine's not a question, but Mark, you're going to stick around till we talk about the delivery truck issue, or not the issue, but the language we're talking about, because that's the main thing I wanted you on board for tonight. Thank you, sir. Stay tuned.
I'm ready with notes in my statute book.
Awesome. That's it, sir. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next is going to be Jim Gilmore and Taylor. I wanted for them to hear that update on the police department. I don't know if it's going to have anything to do with what they have to tell you or not, but I thought it was worthwhile them hearing that. Mr. Gilmore, introduce yourself and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Graham, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mr. Mann, and others. Several weeks ago, Mr. Graham approached me and my group about talking to you and the city manager and others about ways and means to develop a path forward after the completion of some of the planning analysis that you're doing. Before I get into that conversations and what happened, let me just tell you a little bit about Kilmore Hagan Partners, one of the successor group. We're an economic development consulting, redevelopment consulting firm based in Northeast Florida. We have a practice in terms of public policy, primarily dealing with development issues on the public sector and the private sector, putting together P3s. We like to consider ourselves to be implementers, not planners. We're very clear to say we're not planners, but we know that when you're involved in work like this, you've got to have effective plans that guide you in terms of what you want to achieve, that we also believe have to be grounded in terms of the current market situation. Our involvement in redevelopment work in the last couple of years has included the following. We represent and continue to represent Jacksonville University, and we're involved in putting together the entire plan for the Arlington Community Redevelopment area in that particular area, and are involved in implementing that now. We've had a contract with the Downtown Investment Authority in Jacksonville during their planning efforts several years ago, where we worked to put together what we consider to be a very innovative incentive program, retail enhancement grant, to work to develop and bring in new small businesses in downtown Jacksonville. We have a current contract with the city of Lake Worth Beach, which is in Palm Beach County, where we're working with them, quite frankly, on a P3 public-private partnership to develop oceanfront property that the city of Lake Worth Beach owns in that particular area. Our other public clients in Jacksonville include the Transportation Authority, where we have worked with them on their bus rapid transit system coming down to Jax Beach. I think Bill and I, last time we interacted was with Bill and when Mr. Forbes was here, on how we brought that into the beach area. We're working with them on the Urban 2 circulator. We also work with the Aviation Authority as it relates to the redevelopment area that's around the airport authority, and more importantly, how they would proceed to develop their land and private interest. We have a lot of private clients as well. We also work for the Port Authority and have been doing a lot of work again on trying to come up with ways and means to implement the port growth program. So I mentioned that to you because our main purpose is to come up with strategic management focuses and programs that address ways and means to implement public objectives or private objectives. In this particular case, last week or so, we met with Taylor Mejia, by the way, is my associate and colleague, and is amazing. We have a great working relationship. My other partner is Chris Hagan, whom hopefully you'll get to meet as time goes on as well. To meet to discuss what issues were of concern to the chairman, to Councilwoman Hoffman. And as a result of that first meeting, I recommended that we sit down critically with Mr. Mann and with the city manager to discuss what about the relationships between the agency and City Hall and what needed to be done. We had that meeting on Monday of this week. And in that regard, we identified several very important points. One is, and Mr. Mann can confirm this, that there is the intent to hire a redevelopment program manager to work directly for the redevelopment agency beginning October 1. And then based upon the discussion between all of us at that meeting, these points came up that the redevelopment program manager needed to have a roadmap of what that person would do to hit the ground running come October 1 in these different areas. One, communications. It was identified that there were issues related to internal communications between city governmental agencies, and Mr. Mann is doing a tremendous job, by the way, but he is limited in the amount of time that he can work on redevelopment agency matters. So it was an internal communications system and process that we would work to identify as to how a redevelopment program manager would interact with the police department, with the code enforcement department, with Mr. Mann's department, with everyone in the government, so that you were giving current information and this person could be on top of what needed to be done to correct it. It's everything from, as it's been pointed out, looking at a maintenance issue or a curb that needed to be repaired, or a sidewalk needed to be repaired, or a code enforcement issue, or an infrastructure issue on the larger portion, and working to make sure on the infrastructure implementation system that Bill is managing that you are getting current information. And that also included ways and means to discuss about development opportunities and how the agency could be directly involved in knowing what development opportunities were out there in which you could participate in, and how you could work to engender market activity in a particular area. And as part of that, we would work to create, in a very short 3-month period, I'll be very clear, we're only talking about wanting to prepare all this for you in a 3-month time frame. We want to be able to come in, get the job done, turn it over to a redevelopment program manager and make it work. We would work on a redevelopment program manager job description. Mr. Mann and the city manager have already been working on that. And we would put all of this together to make sure it was the right stuff to go out and try to identify someone. There is also an external communication strategy. How do you and the agency, and how would this person work to to involve and to have continual ongoing discussions with the existing business owners and the residents in the redevelopment areas. And by the way, when we speak of redevelopment areas, we talk about not just downtown, but also the South Beach redevelopment area as well, because that's a very important part of what you are and who you have and what you're up to. Those type of communication strategies, external and internal, seem to be the most important point that we talked about. We also discussed, which is another major area of expertise that we have, is looking at various ways and means that the CRA could have an incentive toolbox with some ideas that could be used, that could be there to help. We were certainly going to throw out the retail enhancement program that we developed in other cities, but how you could use the resources you have as a public incentive, public investment to incentivize new development in the area based on what your plan says. There are lots of techniques and ways and means that can happen. And we put in our scope of services that we would develop that based on tools that could be used to help private sector, private property owners that are coming into the area, but also, as was mentioned to us by the city manager, ways and means to develop public-private partnerships on the public land that's owned by the agency or the city in the redevelopment district as well. The capital improvement projects that you guys have got going are amazing. They really are amazing, and they're working to increase the resiliency of the entire downtown area and South Bank as well. But as Mr. Mann pointed out, all of that work's going to be completed in 5 or 6 years. And then what? And this again would be part of a guideline based on the plan that's being done, that finding the right redevelopment program manager would help you then to go out and implement. That would be your person. We would also complete the research of other CRAs to show that how you could talk to folks on the ground doing things in other particular areas. The world of CRAs has changed over the last number of years, thanks to the assistance of our legislature. And as I said, and I will say again, congratulations to you for having the redevelopment TIP districts extended all the way out to when, Bill? 2030? I can't hear you, Bill, but to
2047. We have another 27 years.
Congratulations on that. As you know, when the law was changed, you can no longer extend them under any circumstances. When they end, they end. You can't have any new ones without a vote of the people. And I think you can potentially expand the area, but that's about it. So congratulations on that and having a ways and means to continue redevelopment efforts to achieve what you want to achieve. We submitted a proposal to do the things that I just discussed. What would a redevelopment program manager do? What type of internal and external communication systems could be in place with this person working under bill to the city manager, but more importantly, reporting to you and developing a plan so that when that person is hired, they're hitting the ground running. That was the directive from the chairman. And that's a plan that we think that we can do. I'll give you an example of something that we are working on now that will hopefully illustrate to you how we make this happen. Several years ago, and we managed something for the region called the Jacksonville Capital Works program. And in that regard, we bring together regularly, monthly, as necessary, and this is infrastructure primarily, but it has evolved into areas involving redevelopment programming and planning around the area. Planning Department Director in Jacksonville, FDOT District Secretary, JTA, Planning Department, Public Works, everyone else comes together because, and this was the point I think Mr. Graham was making to some degree, but not like this. Sometimes, and this is big example, JA will come up and tear up a street. You know, maybe a year or so later, somebody else will come up and tear it up. So why don't you know what each other's plans are so you can tear up the street one time? In simplified format, we put together a system to where each of those folks come together and know what their planning is in the short term, medium, and long term, so we avoid that problem. And it has worked. And to some degree, that's what we're talking about here in terms of communication strategy. How do we set up a program of guidelines for you to consider for your program manager working under bill to bring together internal elements of the government and external elements of the community, so you know what's going on and you can work together to accomplish your objective. And our proposal that I submitted to the city manager at his request yesterday and to Mr. Graham would let us do that and give you a 3-month timeframe. We're not interested in we want to be able to assist you to get you what you need with your own person. And I have
Thank you, Mr. Gilmore.
to say that I got to tell you, I really enjoyed the free-flowing conversation we had with Bill and the city manager and Art Graham on Monday. And I would ask them to join in too, because I believe that what I expressed was the sense of what I believe that that on both sides, on Mr. Graham's part, on the city side, was something that would go a long way to empowering you with the city's help to achieve your objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Gilmore. I just to kind of fill in, we did have a meeting on Monday with the city manager. As you heard Bill say before, that they have a position budgeted for October 1st, and that they were trying to finalize a job description. And my fear was, to me, that sounded like the typical kicking the can down the road again. And we've been there and we've done that. And my suggestion and what we worked out was see if we couldn't hire somebody like the Gilmore Group to do the work to prepare for when that person gets here October 1st. I mean, let's make sure we have the job description that we need. Let's make sure that we've had the communication with some of the businesses down there, some of the residents down there, and the CRA as a whole. So we're all on the same page when that person gets here on October 1st. Also, I would like for these guys, if we decide to go this direction, to be part of the process of hiring this person, because if they're doing their due diligence, being in that community and feeling what the pulse is out there, they know the type of person that they're looking for, that we need to hire full-time. And not that we need to end this on September 30th, because when that person gets here, I don't think we just drop them, throw a bunch of papers in front of them and say good luck. I think they may have to work with that person for the next month or two, maybe to the end of the year. And that's one of the things that we can work out in the contract. But I think there's work that needs to be done before we interview and hire that person, and then work that needs to be done when that person gets here. And that was kind of like the proposal that I was asking them to work on. And that's why I have him here to speak to you guys. And I'll open the floor up to people with questions. And Francis, you are first with your hand up.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. First off, I want to say thank you very much, Art. This gives me some hope. So thank you guys and Bill and Jim for having that meeting with Mike. So since we are not part of the meeting, and clearly we couldn't be, there are people on the current council who would like to abolish the CRA. We've been working against a timeline for the past almost year now. They gave us a 2-year timeline. In your feelings and discussions with the city manager, did you get the feeling that there might still be a future for the CRA because they're going to give us time to get this process in place? Or are we just spinning our wheels because it's rumor? I have not spoken to the city manager, but he's only worked with, from what I understand, the city council, just switching hats between the CRA and the council duties. I mean, I just want to see what the feeling of that meeting to where they were going to give the CRA a chance to really dig into this process.
Can I address that, Art? First off, Francis, the entire conversation was neutral on that point as to what the makeup of the CRA would be. It was purely focused on the direction of staff and the administration of the CRA, irregardless of whether it's the group of the outside staff or the outside makeup or a subset of council. That didn't come up at all.
Okay. And then when you're talking about communications, one of the biggest frustrations for me, I'm the oldest one, senior one in the group when it comes to being on the CRA. And ever since I've been on it, we have been asking for help for you, Bill, for easily 5-6 years. And it felt like it's been falling on deaf ears. And when we even announced that a year ago, the city was like, oh, you've been asking for help? So I guess what I'm getting at is, does the communication not just be local businesses and local residents, but is there going to be a communication plan between the boards so this person can actually communicate with council as well as the city manager as well as the CRA? Are they able to be a person in between so so every board knows what's going on, or do we still have to do a designated chair discussion? Like, is that gonna be involved?
I don't mind saying, I mean, our definition of internal discussions is to set up a system so that this person is as described in our earlier meeting, is likely to be under Bill's direction, but is 100% assigned to redevelopment agency work with the ability and the requirement to communicate across all elements of the government back to you, and then all elements of the community back to you, letting Bill and the city manager know what's going on. But while it may be set up that way, and again, I'm speaking for
Right.
professional consideration to think about, Bill, not whatever, is that person still would be in effect your person.
Would they be able to do the reverse of that? Would they be able to say, hey, they're working on this? So if city council is saying, hey, they're not doing anything, they can say, well, they actually are. Or is it still something that needs to be,
Yes.
like, is it gonna go the
Yes.
reverse of that? Because it's one thing for us to get the information, but it's another thing, and the thing that I think is not understood, that we are working. And I don't think some agencies know that we're working, even though we only get 20% of Bill's time. I just wanna make sure it goes both ways.
I think the answer to that is yes, absolutely. There has to be two-way, complete communication and understanding of what's going on, when it occurs, and how it can happen, so you can get on it and figure out collaboratively work together.
And then I have one last question, sorry, Art, one last question. This proposal that you provided, I'm assuming that we'll get some time to review it and vote to hire you, is that correct?
Yeah, can I speak to that? First off, we just got this the other day, and Art and I are in agreement with the general framework of the proposal. Art's already said we'd like to maybe extend it past October 1, so there's a little transitional help for this new person. But I could not provide it to you because whether you know it or not statutorily, anything we discuss, not just on the agenda, but the backup for it, it needs to be available a week before the meeting. So Art and Jim and I will have another conversation fairly quickly, because our scheduled meeting on the 22nd, I would like to have in that package the week before the 22nd, which is next Monday. I'd like to have a shot at the proposal. Potentially, I'd like to put it out as an action item for the 22nd, but if not, you will have had advanced review time and we can tweak it out at the 22nd meeting if that's amenable to everybody.
That works for me. Thank you, that's all my questions.
Jess?
Okay, I think this sounds great. And assuming we, go ahead with the proposal, I think each member of the CRA has sort of their different priorities and focuses. And I would like the opportunity as a downtown resident member of the CRA to have a one-on-one as you develop the job description and the final program for the new director, so that I could give my feelings on what I feel is important and some of the communication avenues I would like to see. And I think that would be better if we could do that on a one-on-one basis rather than through all of us together on a workshop.
Yes, sir. I couldn't agree more.
But I think this is great. I'm really enthused about it.
Okay, Gary?
I wanted to just kind of reiterate what was said, that, I think this is a good step for us to try to pull some things together and better understand exactly what we need in the way of a program manager, director for the CRA, somebody that can be there with feet on the ground day in and day out and really know what's going on in the two districts. I think would be a great asset. I have a couple of considerations also as to additional qualifications, but we can do that on a one-on-one basis. The other challenge that I really see for the CRA that we need to be thinking about looking down the road just a little bit further is if we bring a development person on board and we've got our budgeting cycle coming up here, how are we going to budget for next year? What funds are we going to make available for this individual so that they can truly accomplish some things for the two CRA districts? It's going to be a little challenging because we don't have a plan yet. We don't know exactly what our projects are going forward. But as we look at the budgeting cycle coming up, we need to somehow consider that and think about how to make the funds available to be successful next year.
Gary, I agree with you 100%. That's one of the reasons why I was pushing for these guys to get on board before we got to October 1st, because the budget's going to be approved before then. And
Yeah.
so we want to make sure that we got our ducks in a row going to this next process.
Agreed. That's all I had. Thank you.
All right. So, like I said, we have the proposal that's there. We will be talking about it in our official meeting on what day is that, Bill? The 27th, 29th?
22nd.
22nd. So,
Yes, sir.
yeah, so you guys will have that stuff. You can go through the proposal. You can see what you agree on, see what you don't agree on, see things you may want to tweak or change. But I'm pretty excited about all this. Jim didn't get into this, but he was part of setting up the original CRA from the beginning. And so he ran the show when the CRA had his own staffing. And, they did, if you look at all that development on the south end, that was all part of that. If you look at the shopping centers, the 2 shopping centers down on that south end, that was all part of that. So the CRA was a big, strong entity when it first got started, and we may start moving back towards that. But I figured the guy that crafted it would be the good guy to help us lay the groundwork to move forward. Any other questions?
Implementers, not planners. Bill and your group will do a great job on that. And Bill is fantastic at that too.
Well, we need someone that's going to get up there and wheel and deal a little bit for us. Does anybody else have any questions for Jim or Taylor? Or Taylor, do you want to say any couple of words before you guys drift away?
Can you hear me? Sure. Yeah, I'd just like to add, I've been with Jim for almost 5.5 years now, and redevelopment is something that I've been able to really focus on working with him. And I've been able to see both sides of it. Working with JU, we see how it's best to interact on the outside with a CRA. And then on the flip side of that, working with a DIA, implementing things from the inside. So we're really just ready to get running and research and bring you guys really great suggestions on how to implement some of your programs.
So their contact information will be made available. Actually, I'll have Bill Mann send out an email tomorrow or later today giving you contact information. So if you have questions, I wouldn't eat up too much of the time before we hire them, if we hire them. But if you do have questions, before the meeting, you may want to get those questions answered. And then if we hire them, then they're actually working for us. So you can sit down at that time and bend their ear and see if you can help steer them in different directions. Mark, did you have any questions or any comments from a police perspective?
No, not really. Just know that, when and if you come on board, I'm the commander here, but we also have a sergeant that works down in that area. So we'll be available to you at any time you need us.
Thank you. And I would say, if I can, Mr. Chairman, Bill's going to send out our contact information. Please feel free to call me if you wish. I don't mind having conversations, hired or not hired. Thank you.
If there's no other questions or comments to Jim and Taylor, I'm going to let them go. We're going to move on to the last item on our agenda.
Thank you. Thank all of you.
Both. Appreciate it.
Here, look forward to seeing you one-on-one and in person.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, Bill, back to you if you get us teed up on Jeff's proposal.
Okay, actually, I'll turn it over to Jeff initially because I can see the highlighted changes, but I'd like for him to just describe what he tweaked. And then all I have to do in terms of my part of the discussion is to bring Mark into it for enforcement of what we're trying to implement. And the second part is more of a little custodial item. I want to put the first thing I want to enter into this set of regulations is an intent paragraph that actually lays out why we're doing this. And I want that codified as part of this. And I believe, and Mark, it's a kind of a rhetorical question. I believe this would end up being an amendment to chapter 28, which is streets, sidewalks, and something else in the city code. I think that's where this language would end up going. Is that correct? Do you know?
Yeah, as far as with that, yeah, and with the enforcement, when we get into it, I'm assuming we want to go with a uniform traffic citation, or if we want to go with a parking ticket. There's a couple of different ways we can do it.
Well, and that's why I'm going to lean pretty heavy, especially since Cape is part of the downtown CRA. I'm going to be leaning on y'all's support to kind of get some of that regulation going, because doing
Right.
parking regulations is a little outside of my wheelhouse.
Mm.
But no, other than that, if Jeff wouldn't mind going through what the changes are, we talk about that, and then I'll read briefly what I wanted to have as an introduction. And I don't think we're going to put it to bed and send it directly to council in the next 2 weeks, but I want to further this discussion, because the best thing, Jeff, is I think you've kept it really simple, and that's the best part about it. And I just don't know if there's any unknown or unintended consequences. One thing I do want to do, and honestly, I apologize, I did not have the time yet. I want to graphically map, just if nothing else, in a red toned overshade on an aerial, physically where we're talking about, because I can read this, and just different people have different spatial abilities. I want everybody to see where the restricted areas are, because I think that may help us either confirm this existing delineation or maybe tweak it a little bit. Because I don't know if we've considered the fact that Margaritaville will be coming online, by the end of the year. And so I just want to make sure that the actual area is understood by everybody. And I don't know if you get it just from the written description. But other than that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Okay. Well, this is what we distributed here, and the redlining is what I believe we all agreed to as far as the changes to the original proposal that I had made based on the Key West ordinance. So I did not put anything new in here beyond what I believe we all agreed to. Okay. I do think the need is still critical there. First Street, and to some extent Second Street, are major thoroughfares for our downtown district. It's used by cars, by bicyclists, by pedestrians, pretty much year round on good weather days. And anytime you have a delivery truck sitting right in the middle of traffic, cars, pedestrians, and bikes are all trying to weave their way through on a two-way basis. So I think the need is there. I will just anecdotally, we've got Second Street North here restricted between Beach and 4th. And one of the reasons is that there was delivery trucks frequently on Second Street between 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue, servicing the Bricks and perhaps a couple of the restaurants around the corner. Today I noticed the Budweiser truck was on 2nd Avenue, exactly where we'd like them to be, delivering to the Bricks instead of on 2nd Street. So this is not something that is impossible for these delivery truck drivers to deal with. And again, anytime you down here on a busy day prior to a weekend, you can just see the congestion with the number of different establishments getting deliveries on primarily First Street, but on both of those streets within this area. So again, what we are proposing to restrict is any delivery truck stopping within this area, defined area, at any time. And it's between 1st Street North and Beach Boulevard and 6th Avenue North. And I just noticed a typo on my amendment here. Actually, A should read on 1st Street North between Beach Boulevard and 6th Avenue North. I didn't strike the reference to 2nd Street North there. And then 2nd Street North between Beach Boulevard and 4th Avenue North. And then 4th Avenue North between 3rd Street and 1st Street would be restricted because that is, number one, a gateway corridor, and it's not a very wide street. And then we would restrict the end zones of 1st Street east of First Street for 2nd Avenue North, 3rd Avenue North, and 6th Avenue North. There being no end zones for 4th and 5th, which is the pier parking lot and pier entryway. And there were no other changes to the rest of the text of the proposed ordinance. And that's, again, reflects what we talked about at our prior meeting on this.
Thank you, Jeff. I think the game plan will be, we will talk about this at our next meeting on the 22nd and have a vote to move forward or not. If we vote to move forward, we will allow the police department and however we decide to disseminate this information out to the restaurant owners, to the bar owners, and also see about getting it into the Beaches Leader. So our meeting after that, which would be the 27th of July, we'll have it open to the public. And that's when we'll deal with public concerns and tweaks or whatever we have to do. If we don't have any concerns or anything we can't live with, we can approve it then and send it on to the city council. If not, we may have to have another meeting in August, but at least we would vet the public. And then from there, we hand it off to the city council, and then I think they have to implement it. Francis, you had your hand up first.
I was just hoping you would say exactly what you said. I want to make sure we vet this with the business owners. My biggest concern is, well, one of them is a lot of companies are having to recover from COVID, so I really don't want to push something on business owners right now when they're trying to recover. I know that our visitation will be down, so it's not like it's going to be as busy as it has been in the past. So I'm okay if we do vet this a little bit more with the locals. So I just want you guys to know that that's one of my big concerns. And then I know I talked last time when we did this, and Commander Evans, maybe you can tell me if anything came of it. My biggest concern were the streets. If we had to downgrade some of these restrictions and do just a few spaces, I am more concerned about making sure our fire department can drive by a parked delivery truck, which right now is that First Street corridor by the shopping areas and the Pavilion, and also the place where the buses go. That's really, really like a very busy space as well. So you don't want to have a bus and a fire truck, and you don't want to have a regular car and a fire truck. They can't pass. That's, if we had to make this smaller on its restrictions, that would be my big concern. So thank you for just saying we're going to vet it and we're going to have people come in before we get it to city council.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah.
Ms. Sam?
Yes, when we make the proposal, is there anything that we need to include for like cost, for signage, or anything like that? When we change, the configuration of a traffic, sometimes some traffic is, some signage is necessary, like do not park here between 2 and 5 or something, as an example.
I think that cost would be negligible, but Mr. Mann, would you like to address that question?
Am I muted? No. Yes, sir. Excuse me. Part of that will just be driven by the final delineation, and I agree with Mr. Graham. It'll be a very low-level cost. We're fixing to implement the wayfinding signage plan. It may be something we can piggyback on that. If the plan's already let, if the contract's let, maybe as a piggyback onto that. And if the plan hasn't been let, we'll include that cost within that.
Sam, did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes, thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah, I just note that we're probably dealing with a small universe of 20 to 25 drivers, who have regular routes. They come down here several times a week. The principal people who will be affected is this small subset. So I don't feel there's going to be a need for big elaborate signage because the ordinance will be communicated and the people that need to know about it will know about it.
I'm going to defer to Mark on this, but I also believe you may have to have signage there in order to push an infraction. I don't think we could just do it. Hey, there's this ordinance in place. You guys ought to know you can't park here. I think some level of sign. If we had curb streets out there, we could do it with color coded curbs, but we don't have that option right now because I don't want to put paint on those pavers. But I think some signage is going to be needed.
Right, but not an elaborate setup. I think, a few signs. Again, I don't think the cost is significant on
Well, I
that.
understand. And given what the path forward that Art laid out, I'll have, in fact, I don't feel that I need to run my intent and section that I want to put up front. I'll include that with the draft that we have for the next meeting. One thing I wanted to ask though, and I think we discussed it briefly, but I don't remember everybody just saying, no, we don't. Isn't there a potential that we have a time of day restriction and not just do it across the boards?
We did address that. And I think through maybe it was Mark's input, that if you have a time of day thing, then you're just going to compress everything into a smaller time frame and make that an unworkable situation.
Good point. I just want to make sure that we hadn't left that off the table. I didn't recall
So
that.
we put, in fact, what the very first change in the draft is to insert at any time.
Okay.
There.
So anyway,
Mark, did you have,
go ahead, Art. Sorry.
go ahead, Bill. Go ahead,
Just
Bill.
Mark, between now and that next meeting, then if you can just get a little bit better idea about, the infractions. Factually, I think we put it to bed that we do need some type of signage, but just to get a little better idea about how it would go forward. We're going to be friendly first, give them 2 strikes, and then guess what? You're out. But you did make a good point, Jeff. This is impacting the delivery services. It's not addressing the existing businesses. So if it's not a time of day thing, the drivers will know to come to these properties when somebody's there to receive them, because they're not going to mess up their entire day's route waiting for the manager of Joe's Shop A to show up to do his delivery.
Mark?
Hey, Bill.
Hey.
Sorry, I did talk to a couple of the restaurant owners that are in this route already, and from what I understand, they have, some of these delivery truck drivers actually have a key and they can go in at any time, even if there's not someone there. So,
That's
just a couple of them.
That's trusting managers.
Yeah, so there's a couple.
It's as much verifying the quantities put in as it is access to the building. So that's trustful.
I didn't know all of them have that. All right, sorry.
Mark, did you have any comments or questions?
No, I can use, there were some questions that I had myself and Sergeant Sharp, and I didn't know if you want to wait and we'll go through them all, if you want me to just tell you all of my concerns at one time. But some of my notes on here do include with the signage, the education to the drivers, to the businesses as well.
Yeah, I think the education is going to come. Right now, as I said, we're going to vote on this our next meeting, which will be a week and a half from now. And whatever we decide to move forward with that, we should have some sort of flyers. And Bill, you and I can probably work on that, or you and Jeff can work on that. Some sort of flyers, so the police officers that are out there can disseminate those out to the business owners, bar owners, restaurant owners. And we can make sure it goes to the beaches leader. And it doesn't just have to be one time, it may be twice. I would imagine definitely the week before our meeting, and it may be some other time before then as well. So there's plenty of notification that people that want to come address us on this issue will come address us on this issue. And I'm sure before city council votes on it, there'll be people be allowed to come address them as well. But I just don't want to send something to city council that has not been vetted by us first.
I'm glad you brought up that point, because I wanted to remind everybody in that process, this is an amendment, a proposed amendment to add regulatory language to the city code of ordinances. So it will go to the city council as a strong recommendation from the CRA, but just as that. So when we vote, you vote as a group to consider, do we want to carry this recommendation forward to city council? And you're right, I think it will give the drivers, the public, whoever, an additional opportunity when it goes through city council as well. So I think it'll be fairly well vetted. And I agree with Jeff. It's a small group of drivers, or a small group of product delivery companies that are doing this.
Okay, any other comments or questions on this proposal? Gary?
I'm sorry, I just had another comment, not specifically in reference to the proposal. So I apologize, I jumped in too early.
Okay, anybody else have comments or questions about Jeff's proposal? Okay, Mark?
Yeah, one of my questions was some of the language. You want me to address that now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
When we throughout the rewrite, it's actually specifying a truck. We may want to look at that because not all of them. I mean, are we looking at what size of truck? If we put it to vehicle, that would cover a large delivery truck, a moving van. It would kind of be a little bit broader.
That's a very good point.
So if we could just change the truck just to vehicle, that would probably be the easiest way to do it throughout. And then with Margaritaville, because I know that you specifically set up to 6, but just the sheer size and the it's pretty intimidating, the size of Margaritaville there on that block. Is that something you would want to carry that all the way to 7th as far as with end zones, or with the roadway right in front of Margaritaville?
I'd like to add, I put a note to myself. Tomorrow, I'm going to pull out the site plan for Margaritaville. I will tell you, I know, just because I know generally the layout of the hotel, their 2-story, 7,000 square foot Land Shark Cafe will be on the south end of the building. That being said, that's a major restaurant that's logistically laid out. I want to see what their circulation plan is, and I can speak with the architect to see how they envision it. But if you think of the section between 6th and 7th, there are no driveways. We know what the Dolphin Depot plan across the street will look like. There are no active points. We just need to consider that, and that's information I'll have for y'all at the next meeting. And I'll have a staff recommendation as to whether I think we ought to extend it to 7th and maybe include or not include. The problem with the street ends is once you back in there, you block everybody out and you got to back out into the road to get out. So I agree, it's a great idea to keep them out, but I want to find out logistically how the Margaritaville western face on First Street is going to work logistically. And it may well be that we want to put it up to 7.
Okay.
I know they have internal assumptions. The architects did when they laid it out, but I'm not privy to them necessarily yet. And I haven't had my hands on that plan for a while since the building grew out of the ground. But I'm going to look at that tomorrow.
Okay. And then just a couple of other things. In the second paragraph where you say government trucks, are we talking mail truck? What kind of government trucks? Because when you think about that, that could be anything from one of our trucks, fire department truck, or are we talking mail trucks? We talking garbage trucks?
Well, I believe all of the above. Again, I think that list of exceptions was in the Key West ordinance. And
Okay.
I think what we're talking about is exactly what you listed there.
Okay.
It's not the government isn't going to be making deliveries.
Right.
So whatever they may need to be doing on the street, we would not be restricting.
Okay. Then when we drop down to the 1 through 4 subs, as far as a special event, like for us, we're probably looking at like the air show or something that takes up that whole area. Do we want to define in there as far as a special event that's covering that area? Because we have special events down there throughout the summer, normally at least once a month. And it's not on that road, but it is down at Latham Plaza. So as far as a special event, we may want to narrow that down just a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, that I guess was viewed as the city manager is making that determination. So if he thinks it's worthwhile to waive the restrictions for a particular event, he can do it.
Okay.
It's not a matter of right. It's the city manager making a decision, and I guess he'd be whatever exceptions he makes.
Yeah, they're just kind of the way they're written, because with us, like with special events, the only really special event we have that would encompass that area that we're talking about would probably be the air show. And at that time, those roads are going to be blocked and we're only going to allow them in to do their deliveries at certain times anyway. So I'm okay with that. And then the last thing was pre-holiday times. And again, I get it, it's with the city manager, but I'm just not sure. We're not sure what that meant.
Okay, well, that was something I added in based on a conversation with a couple of the drivers, where I mentioned this is what we were talking about doing, and they, they were frank and says, well, if I have to walk a few extra feet, and I think as Francis noted, they actually get closer to the businesses here than in most areas of the city that they have to deliver to. But for example, St. Patrick's Day, everybody's coming and getting everything filled up. Well, there may not be room on the streets where we'd like them to be. So if for St. Patrick's Day or the 4th of July, we say on the 3rd of July, the city manager says, it notifies the delivery companies that, hey, we're waiving the restriction for this period of time so that you can stock up for the holiday. That was kind of the intent of that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll speak to the chief about it. Just when we get into that, then we got to say who's going to designate the times, and then who's going to make all the contacts. Are we going to do it by mail, or am I going to have the CRA officers do it? I mean, it's all workable, but that just kind of, I don't know if we really need that in there. If we just kind of have a catch-all.
Okay.
But we can do it either way, because we definitely have to have the signage up in order to issue the citations. And we're probably going to be, because we're doing it with the ordinance, we're going to be doing, the preferred method will be the parking citation rather than an actual uniform traffic citation. So that would be our goal, is to address it with our parking citations.
Just has to be punitive enough to be discouraging.
Yes.
I think we could address that certain pre-holiday times. We could probably combine it with 3 and just say special events or holidays, because as Jeff accurately said, it's still all predicated by the city manager. Okay.
That sounds good.
So we could say a special event or holiday.
Okay.
Is that all your questions?
Yes.
Mark, is that all your questions?
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Comments or questions about Jeff's proposal?
Can I go
Mr.
over,
Mann?
just to reiterate, Art, I got a little cross when you were talking about the schedule going forward. I'm going to make these changes and I'll put in my little, the intent language, which is innocuous. It just says why we're doing it. But do you intend to have this ready to potentially adopt at the 22nd meeting? Or did you say you wanted to do it at the July meeting?
No,
Or vote on the.
No.
council?
we as a group, we should have all of our I's dotted and our T's crossed for the 22nd. And then we'll have what we plan on going out to the public with on that day. So our next meeting, we should be able to, we should have what we think is our final, we should have what we want to put forward to the public on the 22nd. And then we will invite the public to come talk to us July 27th.
After we've probably made action on it, or after you've already voted on the action?
Well, we're voting on what we're going to send out to the public. We want to make sure the 5 of us agree on one thing.
That's the nuance I missed. I thought you meant the final. Okay, so I got you. You want to have an internal, you want to have a vote just to say, okay, this is what we all agree that we'd like to now broach to the subject. Broach to the public, get their feedback with the hopes of refining it and making a recommendation to council at the July meeting. Okay, I didn't understand.
This is a workshop, so we can't take any we can't take any action now.
Right.
So we're just discussing it now. So we'll take that action at our next meeting.
Okay, and also that was, so, is there anybody else that wants to talk about this? Because I thought I was just going to give a wrap up about, just to confirm what's going to be on the 22nd agenda.
Okay.
Is there anybody else?
Well, no,
want-
wait,
sorry.
before you do that, Gary has something he wants to bring up. I'm sure he's talking about something he wants on that agenda as well. Gary?
Yeah, just a question. I'm not sure how many are aware of this, but Mango's was up for sale recently. And my question is, was the CRA aware of that? And Was that something we should have taken a look at from a strategic standpoint? Maybe a piece of property that would made a sense for the CRA to purchase? I just don't know how we typically get involved in those kinds of transactions and opportunities.
I can speak to that. The gentleman that purchased the property, Greg Saig, and it was not Mr. Saig personally, but it was him in the form of an LLC with other investors. They were part of the LLC that would have established Surfer the Bar at the Mango's location, the rezoning that was denied in 2014 and by court order got approved last year. So it wasn't a market advertised, hey, Mango's is for sale. It was one of the partners in that LLC that owned Surfworks that was going to develop Surfer. He and a separate LLC had been working with the owner, Mr. Kokobani, and I became aware after the sale had taken place. So it wasn't like it was an MLS listing saying Mango's is for sale. Does that answer your question? We were.
Yeah, I think so. The only thing I was just hoping that, we would have the ability to know about some of these opportunities and, for us to take a look at them seriously and decide whether or not they would make some sense for the strategic planning and development that we ultimately want to do for our vision plan.
Well, just the transfer of ownership of an existing development, I don't have any way of automatically being aware of that, especially if it's not listed as on it. If it's a commercial property listing, I speak with Kate Clifford regularly. She's a commercial broker and realtor in our area. And I generally know that's how I become aware of it. But in this case, it was totally under the radar. We had no way of knowing that the property was going to change hands until we found out after the fact.
Yeah. Well, and maybe that's something that the development program manager could get, have more conversations with the owners down there and get a better sense of what's happening within the downtown district, so that if something does come up in conversation, we can get on top of it quickly.
I would think in some cases we could, some cases we just won't know about it because they specifically don't want it in the public arena. And it's not.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry. I believe in some cases, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm sorry. In some instances, we would be able to because an owner would decide to sell, and if it's out on the market, we'll be aware of it. But it could be some cases where it's a arm's length transaction. Gentleman A approaches gentleman B, they agree to a price, they go to sale. It doesn't have to be publicly advertised if it's a private property.
I understand that. I appreciate what you're saying.
Francis?
I just want to also say, Gary, the gentleman who does commercial sales and whatnot and rentals that I reached out for us trying to find a space for the potential use for our new staffing, and they also are trying to keep me up to date if there's anything up for sale in the area, because I've asked them to let me know, and they didn't let me know about Mango's either. So I do have someone who's reaching out to me if there's something up for sale, so I can share it just in case. So just let you know, we can do that individually as well.
Okay, Mr. Mann, tell us about the next agenda. You're muted.
Apologize. First off, to confirm what Gary said earlier, I have a meeting with him Friday morning to go over the redevelopment list, the South End redevelopment project list. And that afternoon, he and I are going to sit down with Ashley Gossett, the CFO, and just inform him a little more about general CRA financing and the TIF funding and everything. So that will go forward. I anticipate having that South End projects list as a discussion item, not as an action item, at the 22nd meeting. I'm also inviting, and they already know, the Dix Height partners. They sent me the PowerPoint so I can put this out on the net Monday. They're going to just give us a run over of the more detailed version of their peer entryway concept. And we will have as a potential action item, the action plan, the downtown action plan. And even though at that meeting, you want to agree to, hey, this is our final draft of the parking regs, I don't think that's still going to technically be an action item. That's going to be more, hey, we're all in agreement. Let's start letting the public get some input on it. Am I accurate? I don't think that's a formal action item. Is that?
Well, that's fine. Whatever you want to call it is fine.
No, okay. So that it would be those 4 items: peer entryway concept, South End projects list. Those are 2 discussion items. CRA consultant, as in right now, stands as an action item. And then the 4th discussion item, The one we just talked about. I'm sorry. I just drew a blank. Oh, the parking regs. And that's the agenda. That's what I have as the agenda for that meeting. Additionally, just a little housekeeping. I believe you all received the notice for the July 27th training session, which is literally just that, a training session. July the 27th also happens to be the fourth Monday of the month, so that's our regularly scheduled meeting. So it could piggyback and we could have a scheduled meeting on the 27th. And we don't need to decide right now. I'm just trying to give a little housekeeping.
I thought the training meeting was July the 30th.
I'm sorry. I got my notes backwards. We would have a regular meeting that on the 27th, but then on the 30th of that week would pull apart separately and have this training session. I'm sorry. So I'm just trying to let everybody know this is how we're thinking in advance.
I will be in
Okay.
Iowa on July 30th for a family wedding.
Did you say Managua?
No, Iowa,
Oh, I'm like, wow.
Des Moines, Iowa,
On the 27th?
on the 30th.
Oh, okay. And that's something this far in advance, we can probably reschedule it. That's why I want to know. That's probably a good way to put it. Does anybody know right now that anybody else have a conflict? Because this is something that everybody needs to be at. So it sounds like for a reschedule maybe.
I may not be at the 30th because I have to go through these things anyway for the PSC. So this stuff is all duplicative for me. And trust me, I don't have to do it twice.
Well, without knowing the content, I don't know if you can say that though, because I haven't talked to the city attorney. This may be directly focused to redevelopment agencies, not just special districts. I'm pretty sure it is. Let's just treat it.
Well, I plan on reaching out to him.
Okay. So let's view the 30th as a tentative training session. I don't need to have it up on the agenda, up on the city website. It's already on there because she pushed it out to y'all, but it is subject to change. So it sounds like now we need to reschedule it from the 30th anyway.
Because I will definitely be out of town.
Awesome, thank you. And Art, you think it may be duplicative, but we need to get that resolved as well. So let's just treat the 30th right now as a tentative. We already have one person with an issue, so I'll try to reschedule it.
Francis?
Go ahead, I'm sorry. I can reach out via Outlook or via mail just to get an idea of y'all and get an idea when we could do it. But it's basically envisioned as a 1-hour training session.
Francis?
I just want to say, because on my list, I wanted to make sure that we didn't get ourselves in a position to give away a whole bunch of TIF money for the South End again this year, because that was kind of put all of us in a little bit of a bind. When you and Gary sit down on Friday to kind of catch him up on the things that were on the list, can we also maybe add to the agenda the process to get some recommendations or what we as a board would like to propose to the city or for us to move forward to make sure there is a project on the books before our budget happens so we can utilize that money instead of giving it away this year?
Actually, in a discussion I had with the city manager and the CFO yesterday, that I've been tasked with coming up with that item, that list number one, and also from the financial side, what the fiscal impacts are going forward with the proposed reduction of 50%. So yes, ma'am, that's
I know that we have the green, because I know we have the green space going in there. I know that I haven't had a couple of things I was going to share during our last workshop and what we could do to beautify that area as well as the park suggestion, and we never actually got to that because our meeting ended up longer than planned. So I'll make sure that we still address that and we as a board have time to discuss what we'd like to propose, because some of that property is not ours and we will have to make a genuine agreement before we propose it to city. And I want to make sure we do that and have enough time to put it on the books.
I think we can do that as part of the South End projects list discussion, because I'm not going to
Okay,
present
so
that on the, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You know, I just want to make sure it's not forgotten because
No, I think that would be.
that kind of makes some of us a little bit itchy, if you know what I mean.
Right. I think that, I anticipate that being part of that discussion.
All right, thank you.
Jeff?
I noticed today, and then I think it's on the agenda for the upcoming briefing, or maybe the briefing they just had, but that subject was on the city council's agenda, the reduction in TIF balance.
Bill?
Yes, yes, sir. Can y'all hear me? I can't tell if you're here. Okay, yeah, directly to your point, yes, I informed them that I thought that process was backward, that anything discussion with that TIF should have come as a recommendation, or at least with the comments from the CRA before it was brought to the city council. That's part of that lack of communication, because I wasn't aware that it was on that briefing until after the fact. Well, yeah, but it's the same with the Jacksonville Drive trail, the trailway discussion.
Well, I don't know if the city manager or anybody's reached out to you guys, but when we made a suggestion to do that trail on the south side of the road, the city council wanted to do it on the north side of the road. And the city manager made a determination that they're going to move forward with our wishes because it's a CRA district and they're trying to empower the CRA. And so they're going to do what we decided to do. Unless something's different happened, Mr. Mann. I just
No,
want to make
sir.
sure they move.
No, sir. And to my knowledge, after that, the memo or the letter that went out to that effect to the city council where he pointed out that, I believe he told me that he's only had comments from one council person. And he didn't say whether they objections or not. So it seems like it's been generally well received to date. I'm not sure when it went out.
All right. Anything else before I send you guys home? Gary.
Just for my clarification, we received a letter requesting financial information that's required of us on a yearly basis. But in there is also an item that asks about getting the training that we're required from an ethics standpoint. And to date, as far as I know, I've only had one session for 1 hour that I was able to take. I haven't been able to take all 4 hours. Do we have any clarification on how we're going to accomplish the rest of it? I'm sure this whole virus situation has kind of thrown everything up in the air, but I just wanted to know how to accomplish the rest of the hours that are necessary.
Hold on a second before you answer that, Bill. Mark, there's no need for you to hold on unless you just want to sit back and listen to us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
All right.
All right, y'all have a good night.
You too. Bill, go ahead and answer that question.
Gary, did you hook up to the one piece of ethics training that you got? Was it from a link that the city attorney sent out to everybody? Because I do think he sent out some information.
I'm sorry, he sent out some information.
Yes, sir. I thought he sent all the members a link, or if he didn't, he sent it to me, and I thought I forwarded it to y'all about opportunities for online ethics training. Did y'all?
I haven't seen anything, Bill.
I received it.
Okay. I'll try to find it and resend it to you, Gary.
Okay, thank you.
And I will also ask the city attorney if part of this training session he envisions couldn't incorporate some of the required ethics. You're required 4 hours annually, correct?
That's correct.
Yes, 4.
And I will tell you, well, I won't tell you because I'm not sure about the effects of COVID, but this year's FRA, it's the Florida Redevelopment Association, their annual conference is in Jacksonville this year. So there may be an opportunity. I think they do provide ethics. Typically, when we go to the conferences, I think they reach out and do provide a session or two on ethics training. I'll find out if there's an opportunity at the conference as well.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other comments, discussion before we head out? All right. Our next meeting is going to be on the 22nd. Thank you so much for your time and patience. When Bill sends out the contact information for Gilmore and Group, don't be afraid to call them, talk to them, because I'm sure you guys all have big questions, little tweaks. But I would encourage you to reach out and talk as much as you can, because I think these guys are going to help us move to the next level. That all being said, you guys travel safe or go home or whatever it is you're doing. I think I need to go eat. I'll talk to you guys later.
Take care, y'all. Have a great night.
Take care.